Hey, how's everybody doing? Um, hmm, hadn't made a video in a while, and I was actually thinking about something today, and see if I can get this right. There we go. I was actually thinking about something today, and it was really kind of sticking on me. And you know, we see all these drugs, these people who have drug addictions, just people who have drug problems, And question I don't think anybody ever really tops on or really hops on is why do people do drugs to begin with? Is it because they're depressed? Is it why what makes them want to do drugs? Is it just are they young and they were just kind of experimenting and just trying to figure things out, or is it because of something that's happening in their life? Are they depressed, or are they something that happened and just made them change somehow? And maybe felt like they needed an out. I don't know. I've never really thought about it to that extent. Um, but that is something that I think a lot of people need to look at. Why did this person or that person choose to do drugs, or choose to do that drug, uh, for between all the drugs that are out there? Why does this person choose to do this drug, or why does this person choose to do drugs in general? And the next thing we get to, that really hits me is, there we go, is the way that our government looks at drugs. Because going back to what we were just talking about, why people do drugs. Um, so is okay. The way the government, or excuse me, the government, pardon me, the way our laws are set up, does does the system that we have right now, mm, does it keep the cycle going as far as people, because everybody always wonders, why can't they get a hold of these, or why can't the law enforcement do something about these? Why can't we get the drugs off the street? You have those people, and then you have other people that do drugs or whatever else. And but yeah, you always wonder, from both sides of the spectrum, why are things the way they are? And that's what always really hits me is, why do people do drugs? And or a question that really hit me, that just a little while ago. And so I started thinking about it, and um, things started to really add up. And this is my take on it. And you know somebody else could feel completely different. Sorry, just ate. I think I had something in my teeth. Okay, we're good. But anyway, so the way our system's set up is they have classifications for drugs, and how, I guess, how they're scheduled, you know, um, on judge based on, certain factors that they base them off of. But none of their factors that, from what I understand, none of their factors really look at why are people doing this drug, you know, and on that, what we can do to maybe help people with, you know, the way it's set up is it just seems like they want to stamp something out rather than to figure it out, what's causing it, and go from the ground up. It seems like they want to go from, the top down rather than from the ground up. And to me, if you want to find out, it's like a blackberry bush, or a blackberry vine. You cut it down. Well, what'll next year? It'll come right back. And the same thing is about drugs. We bust drug dealers. We bust, the law enforcement bust drug dealers. They bust people that are caught with drugs. Then they are entered in through the system. And for the most part, it's not looked at, when they come into the system, especially the ones who are there, because of doing drugs, I guess, more so than, the drug dealers, because you have two things happening here. You have cause and effect. Um, you know, the I guess you could say the cause is people want drugs. Well, the effect is they're drug dealers. Okay, so if we look at it for what can we do to keep people from doing drugs? Oh well, let's see here. We bust them, we get them in the system, and maybe send them to prison. Especially if they have a repeat thing going on here, we send them to prison, or that we convict them of a felony. And under the way that the laws are written, then that's going to follow them for the rest of their life. So to me, it looks like instead of doing all these laws to just put more people in prison, why wouldn't we look at this from a rehabilitation program? And originally, when prisons were, you know, the I guess in the early 19th century, they were looking at prisons more of a rehabilitation. And supposedly, people who go to prison get rehabilitated. I don't see that. I see the majority of the people that come out of prison, now they've went from being someone who had maybe a drug problem. Now they have become someone with a felony, and are, when before they got busted with this, they already had a problem, of course, because they were doing drugs. So something probably wasn't right there to begin with, something they needed to address. So instead of addressing that, okay, now we give them a felony on top of it. So if it were depression or anything else, and now you have a felony. So when he or she goes to get a job, then he or she is going to get to explain to the people that he's trying to apply for, well, I've got a felony, and then he's going to be turned down time after time after time, because most people, especially if he's been to prison, I've heard so many stories about people that have been to prison trying to get their life back together, and then a few years goes by, and some of them do. Some of them really do, but it's they're left with mm, um, very few choices. Okay, and due to those very few choices, that's why a lot of them, when they come out of prison, we had somebody that had a drug problem, say, or someone had a drug problem because of blah blah blah. Then they go to prison, and now they go from having a drug problem and having to deal with the world out here to going and being around with nothing but criminals. So what happens? Well, now a person who had problems before, and along with a drug problem, potentially a drug problem, um, now they're a criminal. They're a real criminal because they have been in prison, and they've been around some really rough people, people that probably there is no child molesters, rapists, murderers, people with just crazy violent crimes. And this person with a nonviolent crime that that had to do with drugs for one reason or another is now becoming part of, or learning what real crime is about, learning what being a real criminal is about. And so, um, so once they get out of prison, they're just left with really few choices. Or say they get a felony and they never go to prison, same thing follows them, whether it's owning a gun, whether it's, in a lot of states, they can't even vote, and this person's like, I got in trouble with some drugs, and now for the rest of my life, I'm going to carry a stigma that I am a terrible, awful person, and I'm not eligible to vote a lot of times or to carry a gun. A lot of the rights are never fully restored, and it's a really sad situation. So, they go down this this path, and instead of truly rehab, helping this person to rehab and finding out the root cause of why he was doing drugs to get busted with drugs to begin with, and going looking at for more of a rehabilitation process, we just throw them in prison. Okay. Now I'm sure everything I've said up to this point probably makes pretty good sense for just about anybody, who's thinking with a level head as far as, when it comes to drugs, nonviolent. Now, there's always going to be those cases. Drug dealers gets busted with 10 guns. What should we do with him? Well, I mean, there's always going to be those. But I guess what I'm looking at is drugs in general. We need to ask ourselves why people are doing the drugs to begin with. And instead of just putting a big letter D for druggie on their forehead and stamping them for life. Maybe looking at this like we do a lot of other things, mental illnesses, or finding out what's going on, finding out what led up to this point, and if they can be rehabbed. Now, there's always going to be those cases to where, things, if, to me, drugs could be a mitigating factor if there was a murder case, or it could be in a driving under the influence or something like that. I can understand that. I mean, I'm fully on top of understanding that, but just criminalizing somebody for drugs, I think that we should be looking at what's causing this first. Can this person be rehabbed, or which direction to go there? But the biggest factor is, I've listened to a lot of different great speakers, analysts, people who have studied drugs, drug addictions, why a country like the United States would have per capita more of their population in prison than any other country in the world. That's a question to ask, and that's a question we should all ask. Why is that? And to really put that into perspective, a country who has the most freedoms of any country in the world. Why that we have per capita excuse me per capita the largest population, or per capita the most of our population in prison, than any other country in the world. That just really astounds me. I mean, because how can a country so free? Well, because we're also a country that's built on capitalism, and capitalism, I don't want anybody to ever think that I think capitalism is a bad thing, but unfortunately, capitalism in certain aspects, I don't necessarily think that it can be, it's like capitalism and religion. Not a good thing. Or using capitalism for religion, or using religion for capitalism, rather. Certain things, shouldn't be mixed in that equation, but our prison system and capitalism, I don't know how I feel about that, because in America, we have the majority of our prisons are actually privately owned by corporations. Fact check me on that, please do. They're actually not owned by the state or federal government, they're privately owned. Well, here's something you need to ask. What is a corporation or any business? I'm not talking about a charity organization, okay? What is a corporation or any business's main purpose? To make money, of course. I mean, come on. And why would any corporation get into housing prisoners or rehabilitating prisoners? Excuse me. Let's make sure we get that cleared up. Well, it's because there's money in it. Wow, huh? Who would ever thought that housing prisoners would there would be money in it? And the best part of it is the highest percentage of people that are in prison. Can you guess what they're in prison for? It's like Jeopardy. Da, 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 da. No, truthfully, they're in prison because drugs or drug related. Look it up, fact check it. I mean, it's astounding, the percentage. Um, and it just really blows my lid off. And so what I'm kind of getting at here is, okay, we have a problem with drugs, and so we currently criminalize drugs, put people in prison. Then our tax dollars pays for these people in prison. Then our politicians come out and they say, "Well, we're keeping them off the street. We're keeping them off the street." Was he necessarily on the street? I mean, what are we really getting at here? Okay, and I don't want this video to come across like I'm an advocate for drugs. No, under no circumstances is that what I'm saying. What I am saying is, why are we not looking at the cause rather than punishing the effect? What is causing people to do drugs? What is making them want to do drugs? What about their life is so unhappy? Or the drugs that, some of the drugs, like, well, I can't say that I agree with marijuana. That one shouldn't be criminalized. That one should be, I mean, this is a plant that grows on the earth. I mean, that's just blows my mind. But then again, that falls under what I'm getting at as far as money, economics. The prisons being corporate owned. There's money in this business, and so what happens is you have people, these corporations that own these companies. They lobby, push money to legislators to pass laws, so they can get more money on as far as you know, the courts get more money in fines, states get more money in fines. Um, there is, then you're incarcerated, or the person, if he goes to prison, then our tax dollars pays to keep this person in prison. But why? And maybe this is something that people, will disagree with me with, but why would you rather pay to put somebody in prison for 10 to 20 years rather than trying to pay for them every day? Okay, you pay for them to eat, sleep, and shit. That's the truth. Medication when they're sick, the whole 9 yards. Why would you want to pay for that? Why would you not want this person in a rehabilitation program a year, 2 years, hell, I don't know, 3 years? Find out what's going on. Find out if he can be rehabbed. Now if if the person does something violent or a criminal act, well, then there's always where we go from there. But why is it we automatically criminalize people for doing something that doesn't involve anyone else? Because oh yeah, because normally in a crime you have to have two things. Um, you have to have a plaintiff and a defendant. You have to have basically who perpetrated the crime and the victim. Okay, and so what they do is, the way that they've written it about drugs, well, society is the victim. Do I agree with doing drugs? No. Am I trying to say doing drugs is cool? No, nothing of the sorts. I'm trying to get people to understand that the more people follow along with these politicians that are getting paid money, legislators that are getting money to pass laws, in this war on crime or excuse me, war on drugs that failed, at least 2 decades ago, at least 20 years ago, this war failed. It has been an absolute failure, if not 3 decades ago. There's no way they're ever gonna to win this supposed war on drugs without addressing, excuse me, without addressing the problem. But going back to what I was talking about, so the prison systems push money in, so there's harsher punishment. People get longer times in prison. Um, then, so they're getting your tax dollars. So we all out here while we're working are paying for these people in here in prison. Do you like that? No. Oh, but it keeps our streets safe. It keeps this safe. It keeps that safe. Are we talking about the guy who was doing drugs and, it was nonviolent, or who are we talking about here? If we're talking about murderers, child molesters, someone who actually did something bad, or, actually committed what I would say, look at it as even a semi-violent crime, then I can kind of understand and go along with you as far as should they be in prison? Yes. But even that, we should be looking at what's causing these problems. And there's so much money that's going in to house these supposed criminals, and they are when they come out of prison, because the system will have turned them into one, whether it's the people that they were in there with or the way that they will be restricted due to carrying a felony once they get out of prison. All of these is going to make them into that because one way or the other, when you restrict someone long enough, it's kind of like a passive old dog. You beat him hard enough, he will bite you. So when you keep taking when someone has made a mistake, and obviously whenever they started doing drugs, they made a mistake, but I'm saying, who has not made the best choices, and for what reason or another, they decided to do drugs. That's what we need to look at. Why they're doing drugs to begin with. If we can actually look at why they're doing drugs and deal with that, I think that the drug problem, a lot of it will fix itself. But now remember what we were just talking about the prisons, okay? Well, there's a lot of people when from the time someone gets busted with drugs, um, until he goes through prison, gets out of prison, or even if he never goes to prison, just through probation. There's a lot of money and things and wheels that gets turned along the way. So first of all, he gets busted. If drugs were in a vehicle, say something like that, or a certain amount in the house, they seize the vehicle, they seize the house. Or say it's there was no seizure. The guy had some drugs in his pocket, and he gets busted with them, and they seize the drugs, and of course he has to go through the whole process, paying to get out of jail, or maybe he didn't even have to pay to get out of jail, okay, but he goes to court, and when he goes to court, he's going to get a fine. Hold on, throat was a little dry. He goes to court, and they're going to give him a fine, okay, and even if that's the very first one, the very first start of it, say he gets the fine and he don't go to prison, okay, then he gets put on probation. Then he pays the probation every month until that's over, and the classes that they'll make him go to. I mean, there's a lot of things a lot of money is gonna be paid out here. Okay. Then the second one, guy gets busted for drugs. They seize his vehicle, or say they don't do that. He just goes to jail and he stays in prison. Um, so they fine him, goes to prison. He's in there for, say, 5 years. He's in there for 5 years. So the taxpayers then is going to have to eat that 5 years. We're going to have to pay for him to be in there because this guy wanted to do drugs, or he had drugs, or whatever else. Okay. Then once he gets out, then he's going to have to pay, supervision costs and go through this big long process as well. My point is this. I've gave you a lot of examples and a lot of things as far as about drugs and as far as the way our system, you know, um, is really not set up to rehab this person. Um, if you look at your local police department, sheriff's department, a lot of their money that they get is actually, if you look at how the percentage it comes in, the fines and the taxes, things like that, as far as where the money comes from to fund them. A major portion of it is from drugs. Without all these drugs and without all these drug busts, they would be, um, we wouldn't have nearly as many police. You wouldn't have, these huge SWAT teams, because a lot of this is used because they have issued a war on drugs. So in any war, you got to have your soldiers, okay? And so they've built a big army around this, and an army costs money, okay? And that's what I keep getting back to here, and why that it seems like to me that I don't think that our government wants to solve this problem. I really don't. Do I think it's the local police department? No. I think this goes way, way up. But everybody that's involved in it, of course, to some extent, whether it's job security or, uh, whatever else, they've kind of got to swallow that pill, to just kind of look away from, this whole thing, because I think anybody who's had to deal with it really, I think anybody with common sense there's been an awakening moment where that they've said, why do people do drugs? And, you know, why does people do drugs? Well, it's a good question, and like I say, I think there needs to be more money pushed into that. But no, a lot of your law enforcement, DEA, ATF, a lot of these, they would take a huge hit, and that would be a lot of jobs lost. So my point is, I don't think they want to solve the problem because the problem creates jobs, and the jobs make for a bigger government. And a government entity generally don't do this. They continue to do this. If the war on drugs was working, would they be continuing to constantly require more and more law enforcement? Would they be excuse me, I'm getting all stuttered up here today. Would they be continually, constantly pushing for, they need more money for this, need more money for this, to go for this special equipment to catch these guys, to do this, to do this, to do this? No, they wouldn't. But that's what I'm saying is, if what they're saying, and I agree, we have a huge drug problem in our country. There's no doubt in it. But I'm saying this, if what they're doing hasn't worked in 30 years, do you really think more technology to catch more people or more of this to do this is going to make a difference? As long as there is a demand, there will always be a supply. My God, look at the stories you hear about prisons. In prisons, they have more drugs, as far as they say per capita than we do here on the streets. Why is that? Well, there's a demand. If there's a demand, there's going to be a supply. People shove them up their ass. They swallow them. Any way they can to get these drugs in there. But there's money in it. And so anytime that there is a demand, there'll always be a supply. And going back to what we're talking about out here, busting, this drug dealer or that drug dealer, it just creates a void. Anytime that there's a void or a vacuum, it will actually fill itself. There will be someone that's going to come right in, jump right in, and say, "Well, hey, I can fill this void. I can make money off this." And there'll always be a Pablo Escobar. There'll always be, these Whitey Bulger, or any of these big time drug dealers, just because that we have made such a criminal. Hmm, we have made it into such a there's so much money to be made there criminally. Excuse me, I was trying to get my words together. There's so much money to be made there criminally that it leads people to to want to do these. And people say, well, let's pass more laws, let's pass more laws. Is it gonna, if the laws you have now that they're already breaking, do you really give a shit that, or do you really think that the people breaking the laws gives a shit if there's two more laws or three more laws or five more laws? They don't give a damn if you put 10 more laws. If the money's there, they're gonna find a way. I mean, that's just the way it is. Like I say, in prison, they shove it up their ass to get it in there. Okay, so I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of anything going up my ass. But that's to each their own. Hey, don't want to call anybody out there or make any comments on that aspect. But it's just not my thing. But yeah, I think we really need to look at the main problem here, and is from all these laws that have been passed. Instead of dealing with why people do drugs, we just continue to criminalize them, which makes these huge mafias and these terrorists and all these people who supply the opium and the drugs, as far as the heroin and the cocaine and the meth and all this other stuff. It just makes them more money. I mean, they're going to continue to break the laws. If there's a demand, there's going to continue to be a supply. So here's my proposal. Why don't they actually spend some money and look at why people are doing drugs and try to assess going around that, rather than just saying, well, you're now a criminal, you're now a felon, you're now this, you're now that, you're no longer a productive member of society, go to prison, go wherever. It just it really blows my mind the way that we just discard people like that. And it could be something just as small as someone got busted with a bag of drugs in their pocket. Someone had drugs in their vehicle, and I'm not talking about large amounts of drugs. Some of these drugs carry such a heavy penalty, like cocaine. It carries it's a felony in any amount. So I don't know. I guess maybe some people is going to have a completely different spin on this than me. I'd love to hear your comments. Maybe there's something I missed, but to me, I think that we need to look at this and say, why are people doing drugs? Why are we putting people in prison for problems that could be potentially fixed? And why are we paying all these money to these privately owned prisons so that they can continue to throw people in prison, um, so that they make more money, or continue to push money to legislators to make laws stiffer to throw people in prison, and keep them in prison for longer periods of time. So us taxpayers, we taxpayers, are paying more money. It doesn't make sense. Tell me what you think. God bless. Take care.